Welcome to Mixtape Theology. I'm one of your hosts, Rachel Cash. You are listening to part 2 of Dr. Ashley's conversation with Michael Card. In this final episode with Mr. Card, he answers questions that some of you sent to us via our social media. Thank you for sending those in. If you'd like to win a copy of Michael Card's latest book, The Nazarene, 40 Devotions on the Lyrical Life of Jesus, simply head over to our website, mixtapetheology.com, and sign up for our email updates by March 31st, 2021. And now, part 2.
To our social media audience, I asked people if they had any questions that I could ask you. And so I want to ask a few of those, and some of them are fun. Okay. Some of them are a little deeper than others. At Mixtape Theology, we're all about digging into the lyrics of theology of the songs we love. And you are kind of the gold standard, in my estimation, of theology and music, even if you're not going to write any more songs, at least in the 80s and 90s. And you were, was that challenging? Why don't we see more of that? I mean, someone can even just look up on your Wikipedia and read. There's times when you struggled with, what was happening in the Christian music industry. And of course, some of those artists in the 90s I loved, and some I'm like, what's going on? Is it just a desire for people to sell albums, a lack of discipleship? I guess that's something you've probably thought about through the years.
Yeah, the answer is just one thing, because it was a part of the Jesus movement. And a lot of us were writing songs. I was being discipled by a pastor who asked me to write songs based on his sermon. So I would have never written music if it wasn't for that. And then once I got into it, I think a lot of it was reacting against, what I saw was the commercialization of Christian music, and, people writing a song that sounded like whatever the current secular hit song was. And I think those days are sort of over now, but back in the day, for a lot of us, it was something that we fought against.
Well, it does seem like that maybe is not as bad as it was, but then, now this is just an opinion, I could be totally wrong. Then the worship movement, which I know worship, has went through stages for the last several hundred years, and with a lot of good it brought, then it's kind of like every artist decided to make a worship album, and every worship leader that could play 3 chords on a guitar was writing worship songs.
Right.
And that seemed to water some things down too. Maybe I'm wrong, but
no, I see it that way too. I think what happened was the failure of CCM led to people writing worship music. And I really think it started as that the Christian CCM music was so shallow and so unbiblical. Other people just said, well, look, I'm gonna write these songs and because of our failure in CCM to write worship songs, other people started. But then, unfortunately, the same thing that happened in CCM happened to worship music. All of a sudden, you have worship music stars and people writing songs so they can be, And so it did, anytime something's commercialized that way, I think it inevitably takes that direction. The truth is, though, there's still lots of men and women out there writing some great stuff. You may not necessarily hear it, maybe only in your area or only in the church where they're writing those songs. But there's some great songs being out there being. But there's a lady in a church I went to for a long time. She was elderly, and she was sort of the matriarch of the church. And she used to say, "If the devil can't make you do wrong, he'll make you do right wrong." That was one of the wisest things I've ever heard in my life. So I think that's what happened with music in general. If he can't make you do wrong, he'll make you do right wrong.
And there is a renaissance of people desiring to. I can think of some of my new favorites. The Gettys are doing a great job writing these modern hymns and Sovereign Grace music. There's a group I've been listening to, City of Light. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but where you just people have realized this, and so that's the prayer that people are writing God honoring biblical music for us to use in worship, and then still, I mean, psalms, hymns, praise songs, and still use the hymns and still use the psalms and write new stuff that's theological. Use all of it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have any favorite artists? That was a question someone had.
The people I listen to tend to be the songwriter. I mean, the James Taylors and the people like that, unfortunately.
Right.
Well, and not Christian, but although I did hear that he became a Christian. So yeah, I'm from the era of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and James Taylor. Those are the people. Dan Fogelberg. Those are the people that I listen to. There's an instrumental musician who lives here in Nashville who is a believer. He's actually a friend of mine, John Mock. John's instrumental music is the best, the finest instrumental music that's being written right now. Mm-hmm. And he's a sweet guy. So John Mock is a go-to guy. Yeah, that's probably it.
Here's a really interesting question. One of our people on social media asked, Mr. Card, what was it like to have Phil Keaggy open for you on your tour? So I didn't even. So did Phil open up for you at one point?
Yeah, we did a tour together, and I don't know if he always opened. I think what we did was it was a co-bill thing, and one night I'd open, another night he'd open, and we'd always play together at the end. Yeah, Phil is. I describe Phil as a quirky genius. He's, if you know who Phil Keaggy is, he's sort of our paradigm in terms of being instrumentalist. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, even you being a phenomenal musician, that there you're up on stage with one of the best guitar players on planet Earth.
Right. You don't kid yourself about whether you're a good guitar player when you're playing with Phil Keaggy.
Another person asked, and for the listeners that may not aware of this, and as a musician, I'm aware of it and have watched it in fascination. So if you don't know, Mike is you're left-handed, but you've always played a right-handed guitar upside down, right?
Uh-huh.
Did you just figure that out yourself? Did someone teach you how to do that? Did you? Your family couldn't find a right-handed guitar, and you're like, well, I'll just turn this puppy upside down and figure it out. Like, what led to that?
Well, I grew up in a musical part of the country. I grew up in Nashville, and one of my best friends was Earl Scruggs' son. Earl Scruggs, the banjo player. Mm-hmm. And in their house, they had a priceless pre-Civil War Martin D45. It was when they got it from some his son Randy got it from some pawn shop, and when they called Martin to value it for insurance, Martin said, "There's no number we can put on this guitar. It's priceless." Okay, and it's a right-handed guitar. Well, I could go over to their house and play that guitar anytime I wanted to, and that guitar is the reason why I play right-handed instruments. I had access to some incredible instruments, but they're all right-handed. So, and it's frankly much easier, I think. I can play anybody's guitar, which is a good thing. I don't have to have a hand guitar.
Another person asked, so did you help with were you on the translation team for the Christian Standard Bible?
Yeah, I was.
Someone mentioned to ask you about that, and maybe particularly with Psalms. That's amazing that you were part of that team.
Yeah. I was the stylist for the CSB, which means when the translators did their work, I would go through it and make sure that the style was fairly consistent. And what it basically meant was, and this sounds like kind of a scam, I got paid for reading the Bible for like 5 years.
Well, that's a sweet gig there. Yeah.
It was a sweet deal. It was a sweet deal. And I'm very proud of CSB. I think it's a great translation. It's the one I use all the time now, and it's not because I worked on it. It's because I think it's a really good, fresh translation. I think we need that from time to time. My mentor translated Mark and Hebrews for the NIV, And I can remember when he was, involved in that process in the late 70s and early 80s. And everyone was so angry. NIV, why can't King James is good enough for Jesus, so why can't you just use the King James and that sort of thing? But I learned that it's important because language is always changing. Words over time change. And so, yeah, it was fun. And I learned a lot, learned a ton of stuff working with those, the translators.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions. I did want to ask. I had one of our audience members asked, and I love this question because one of my favorite songs of all time. They asked, what about the backlash that you had from the song "God's Own Fool"? And I discovered God's Own Fool in the mid 90s, years after you had written it. And I loved it. And just the idea of paradox. And so I guess thinking about it, I can see how maybe some people that weren't really thinking through it, but was there backlash for that song?
Oh yeah. And it was people that don't understand what a metaphor is. And if you don't understand what a metaphor is, it's hard to explain, it's hard to explain that. But very literally, they were saying the Bible says, don't call your brother a fool. You're in hellfire. And, you're, of course, I guess I was calling myself a fool. But anyway, they were very upset by just the use of the word fool. And what I was doing was I was adapting Paul's statement about the gospel being foolishness, which, again, that's a metaphor. He doesn't literally mean that, obviously. But it's foolishness to the world. And if that's true, if the gospel is foolishness to the world, then we're God's own fools. Mm-hmm. And I still think that's a powerful idea. And it's I like that. I like that song. That's one of my favorite songs too.
I love it.
And but whenever you go out on a limb and try to say something new, there are people that just don't get it. And I was commanded by people in whole church bodies, to never play that song. But you know what? That's okay. I don't mind getting in trouble if I feel like I'm doing the right thing.
And we hadn't talked about this song. I don't even know what your thoughts are on it, and the audience listening to this will be mixed. But recently, a modern example is the song "Reckless Love" has had a lot of that same backlash of, really? God's not reckless. And I think, the man that wrote that song, it was, again, a metaphor. From our perception, God looks that way because why would he do this? We're not saying he is, but you gotta think through what he's actually saying. So, yeah. Right.
Well, and that's the problem. There are people who don't want to think through things and engage with their imaginations. Right. And, so, but, people misunderstood Jesus in the same way. I mean, eat my flesh, drink my blood. Let's talk about some offensive language that people couldn't engage with. A lot of his disciples left, John says. But, metaphors are powerful that way. So,
one more question. I had one listener wanted to ask, what is the background of the song "Who Can Abide" from the Word? And they actually said the lyric, "If we can't stand by faith, we can't stand at all." I know that's an older song you wrote, but he was really interested in the background of that song.
Yeah, that's from Revelation, I think. I don't remember writing. I don't remember what I went through writing that song. But I was, that's a question in Revelation, I think, or one of the prophets. I'm not sure exactly. I mean, that's I can't call that up, but that's me trying to react and engage with the song that's in Scripture, and the clear teaching is, the implication is who can abide, who can basically survive the second coming, and the answer is if you don't stand by faith, you're not going to stand at all. So that's what I can dig up.
Well, guys, this has been Mixtape Theology and our special guest, Mr. Michael Card. I'm going to be giving away a copy of his newest book that we discussed, The Nazarene, The Lyrical Life of Jesus. And if you'd like a chance at getting a copy of this, courtesy of InterVarsity Press, just go to mixtapetheology.com and sign up for our email list, and we'll get you in a drawing for that. Thank you for being here. Be blessed, everyone.